Hi, everybody. I'm Maggie, and I'm so happy to be here. And I do not like looking at myself while I'm talking like this, so I'm going to hide my view. I don't know if that works or not. Anyway, it doesn't look like it does. As Christine said, I am in recovery myself. I just celebrated 10 years of sobriety on August 12th, and it has been a really wonderful journey for me, but I've gone through a lot of hard times during that. I am a parent of a Renaissance alum. My son Conrad is 24 and he went to Renaissance in 2020, and he um, was very resistant to, a- he was very open to the ideas of recovery and Renaissance. He really was sort of thriving there, but he did not believe that he was going to stop drinking. I think he believed he was an alcoholic, but he didn't believe he was going to stop drinking. So that I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I'm also a parent of my son, another son, my stepson, who has schizoaffective disorder. He does not have the substance use disorder, but being a parent of a mentally ill child, I've decided is very much like being a parent of an addict. There's just so much going on. And I think that my journey with self-care around, oh, and then I have so I should back up just a little bit, very briefly. My husband and I have 7 children together. Our first spouses passed away when we were in our 30s, and we got married when he was 40 and he was, yeah, 41 and I was 39, and we had 7 kids, and they were ages 3 to 14. So there was a lot going on. And that was in 2006, and I got sober in 2012. Thank goodness. I mean, 2014. Thank goodness. So, um, another one of our children had, again, not substance use disorder, but it felt he was lying and procrastinating and was very mentally ill for a time, and it felt like living with an addict. So my journey with self-care has been long and hard, and I want to start the talk about self-care by saying I sort of hate that term self-care. It sounds like a Hallmark card to me. And and then I think, oh, self-love. But again, self-love, like I have good friends who I'll say, oh, self-care or self-love, and they'll just be like, oh, I don't even want to go there. So I think maybe the best way for me to frame it that makes it sort of more appealing and less like a Hallmark card is self-compassion. And self-compassion is a practice. And just like my recovery, just like working the steps of Al-Anon or working the steps of AA, it is it is something that I live. It's not something I'm intellectualizing. And the only way I can live it is by practicing it and having these tools. So I will dip in and out of stories about my family, but I've been thinking a lot as this talk has come up, and I've done a talk similar to this before. Also, I work at Karen, and I'm in the education department, and my dear friend, colleague, and supervisor, Mallory Henry, I believe, is on here. I think I saw you, right, Mallory? Anyway, so we work in the education department too. So I have my teacher hat on sometimes, I have my parent hat on sometimes, I have my recovery hat on sometimes. But because of who I am, these are all integrated. I am just who I am in all of these areas. But I do have a talk that I've given kind of more as an educator. So I've been thinking, like, what is the nut of self-compassion. And for me, it's boundaries. It's boundaries, connection, and how do I get that? Through mindfulness, through being aware and creating new habits. Self-care is coping with stress in a healthy way. And self-care is not self-focus. It's not me, I'm going to the spa. Um, and sometimes I hear people say, and and then I just was like, I'm done. And I've done this myself where I've been so frustrated with a child and his behavior. And particularly around my son with schizophrenia, I didn't say it to him, but a few times I just wanted to quit. And I thought that was self-care. I can't do this anymore. I just have to take care of myself. And it's not that either. It's creating boundaries that keep me healthy so that I can do the next right thing for my child, and for my child who may be an addict in active recovery, or in active addiction or in recovery. So, when I first heard the term self-care, I was like, oh, it's a mani-pedi, it's a spa day. And that's not what it is. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe, it's a mani-pedi or something like that. And for me, that would mean I really do have the time to do that. I really do have the money to do that. Because when I spend money on something self-indulgent and I don't have the money and I say, oh, it's for me, it's me time, it doesn't feel good to me. And again, this is what I have learned by practicing all of the steps kind of in my life, knowing the next right thing to do. Um, so the boundary part is really important to me. And I'm looking down here at the PowerPoint that I actually created for this talk, but I wanted this to be more of a conversation and a time for us to talk to each other, like in a meeting, rather than me lecturing to you. But one of my images is the cover of The Giving Tree. And I think most of us have read that book to our children or to ourselves. It's by Shel Silverstein. And it's a beautiful and heartbreaking story about this tree called the Giving Tree. And a little boy has the tree in his backyard, and he goes out to the tree and she gives him her apples. And over the years, she just gives him everything. And one of the lines is, and she loved a little boy very, very much, even more than she loved herself. And at the very end, the images of the little boy as an old man standing in front of the stump that was the tree, because she gave and she gave and she gave. And so the reason self-care, self-love, self-compassion is so important is that I don't want to end up depleted and a stump and that I've given up everything, right? So that I love that image. It's so strong. And so when I'm thinking about helping my child who's an addict, I have to stop and think about what is really helpful. So now, for example, Conrad is in recovery, but I don't know how well he works his recovery. He seems really good. He lives out in LA. He's got a great job. He's got his dream job. He'll call me and say, oh, I just left yoga. And I know that so much of his success in the last year, and he didn't get really serious until last September. So much of his success is because of his recovery. But my job and my self-care is to not get caught up in his recovery. It's his, not mine. So I'm not asking him if he's going to meetings. I'm not asking him if he has a sponsor. I have a very clear boundary with him. And I'll tell this story because this is really pertinent. When he was at Renaissance, when we were in the family counseling, they were saying to me and to Tom, his stepfather, who's who's very much, his father, because Conrad's father died when Conrad was 3, and Thomas really raised Conrad. But he was saying the therapist was saying to the two of us, your boundary should be that if Conrad is using, you will have no relationship with him. So that was his idea of self-care and his boundary. Like, I need to take care of myself because I can't save him. Well, that didn't work for me. That for me wasn't self-care. I I needed to come up with a boundary that aligned with my values, that I could uphold. And so instead of saying, if you're using at all, I'm going to have nothing to do with you, the boundary became, and we really hashed this out. We were in the therapy, and I was like, nope, I can't do that. I know I won't uphold that. And we hashed it out, and the boundary became, you will not drink or use around me. And even if it seems like you are, and I don't have any proof that you are, you're out. Like, I'll ask you to leave. You can't be at our house. And I don't want to see you hungover. And I don't want to have to figure out how to prove that you're hungover. My boundary was, if you're presenting as that, then I don't want to be around you. So that was a boundary that I could live with, and that to me was self-care. I I could feel okay. I could feel like I was protecting myself well enough with that. Um, this is another, like, a lovely image, and Mallory shared this with me a couple years ago, but it's walls keep everybody out and boundaries teach people where the door is. And I know this talk is about self-care, not about boundaries, but for me, they're so intertwined, because when I think about, like, I have to take care of myself with boundaries. So say I've been going, and somebody really wants me to attend an event with them, some evening, and I'm tired. That to me is a boundary slash self-care when I say, you know what, I'm just not up for it tonight. I'm too tired. And I've also learned through my own recovery that I don't have to give an excuse to care for myself. I don't have to lie. I can just say it's just too much for me. So another thing, speaking of self-care and boundaries, I actually have COVID. I'm home alone right now, so it's okay. But I reached out to Christine and I reached out to Mallory to let them know. And Mallory was like, I got you if you can't, because I've been coughing and blowing my nose. And Mallory said, I can step in if need be. And Christine was so great. So I took care of myself by being open and honest and saying, here's what's going on. I might have a fever or something, so I can't do this, but turns out I really feel okay. And then I also knew in my heart of hearts that sharing my experience, strength, and hope was a form of self-care for me. When I share my authentic self and my authentic story of hardship and successes, it feels good to me. It makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself. So here's a quote from Brene Brown. She says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. To love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. That's taken me a long time. And I think so often people who are givers just they can't put themselves in the recipient's role of giving. Like, I will give to my children, I will give to my loved ones and my friends, but I have to give to myself in order to be well enough to be really present and of service to those people. So I'm sure you all have heard this, that addiction is a disease of isolation. So this is on, at the beginning of this, I mentioned boundaries, and then I'd like to talk more about connection. So addiction is a disease of isolation, and the opposite, the antidote for that is connection. And I believe as families of addicts, loved ones of addicts, we are in the disease too. I'm sure you've heard it over and over. Addiction is a family disease. So if I have a child with substance use disorder, and I have a child who is very mentally ill and another child who's like somewhat mentally ill, and if I don't share that, I am isolating myself because I'm trying to show the world that I've got it all together, this sort of perfectionism of like, I look good, I'm working well, I've got it all together. When in fact, the true self-care is connecting authentically and telling our stories to one another. And I think all of you in this meeting know this. The power of sharing our burden and again, our joys, our successes is I it feels like magic to me. I don't understand why it works so well, but that's why I go to, I used to lead and now I'm a regular old member of the Westport support group that meets on Zoom and then sometimes in person. And I work my own program of recovery in AA quite frequently. I attend meetings. The meetings mean so much to me to hear how people are doing. And it's the people who are truly authentic. And we all can hear that. We all know that. So again, that to me is self-care. So then I'd like to ask you, and not to have you answer right now, but I'd like to ask you these questions because I want to hear about this when I'm finished talking, which will be soon. I don't want to go on too much. But how do you connect? How do you connect? So I connect. I have support groups. I'll go for a walk with a friend. I might go to a coffee shop to work or study. So I'm not meeting anybody, but I'm connecting with humanity. I will rest to connect with myself, to read a book, to listen to a podcast, to listen to music, have a meal, make a meal with family or friends. I love going to classes for fitness. Like I know a lot of people can do it at home on their computers, but I love going to a class because it's that connection with other people. And it's not even that I'm talking to other people so much, it's just being out in the world. Being of service is a huge source of self-care for me. I always feel better and more worthy when I can be of service. Having a pet, talking to my colleagues at work. I was so disappointed today. I couldn't go to the retreat that our department at Karen had today because of the silly COVID. Anyway, so I'd love to hear when I stop talking about how you all connect. And then mindfulness is important, and I'm not going to go into that too much, except to say that mindfulness is not meditating. Mindfulness is simply being aware on purpose without judgment. So I can be mindful when I'm brushing my teeth. I can be mindful when I'm walking down the stairs. And there's just something about that practice of being aware that gives me maybe just a second when it really matters between um, a trigger and my response. So before I started working this program, I was super reactive, and I'm still reactive. I'm sensitive and I'm emotional and I'm passionate, but I now have the ability, because I practice being aware and being more present, that I can just take a second before I just react. I can respond. And that, again, is self-care, because when I go to bed at night, I want to feel good about myself. And if I've taken care of myself, it means I haven't lashed out at somebody in frustration or because of exhaustion. Being exhausted is not taking care um, of yourself. So, I think I might just leave it here. I really would love to hear from everybody else, and I'd love to hear how you take care of yourself, or even how you view self-care if you think it, I just want to open it up. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Maggie. That was amazing.